Says critics of the new Obama policy is Representative Ileana Ros-Lehtinen of Miami. She is, of course, a Republican, served in the U.S. House since 1989, and was the chair of the House Foreign Relations Committee. Congresswoman, great to have you come in.
Thank you so much,
May
Brenna
we use
and Michael.
first names here since we know each other? All right, let me begin with, I think, a very basic question. U.S. citizens can travel freely to Iran, North Korea, two-thirds of the axis of evil, but they can't travel to Cuba. Why shouldn't Americans be able to just simply travel to Cuba?
Well, we have to make the argument and educate the members of Congress, especially the new folks, that the tourism industry in Cuba is totally controlled, manipulated by the Cuban military, the Cuban intelligence service. So when you have all of these dollars going and through supposedly tourism activities, go directly to feed that machinery that represses the Cuban people, it means that that's money going right to beating the heads of the ladies in white.
Won't there be some trickle down for the ordinary Cubans? I mean, Cubans who work within tourism, they get dollars, they get tips, and they get paid, even though they get paid by the Cuban government, not by the Melia hotel chain or employs them.
Well, that argument could be made. That's akin really to slavery, saying, they have a slave economy in Cuba where that hotel owner who doesn't really own the land or the building.
It's a joint venture with the Cuban government.
It's a joint venture, meaning it's really the Cuban regime, the military that runs it. That foreign business pays the regime in dollars. The regime pays worthless pesos to the workers. So if you want to say that that's trickle-down economics, it's really, really bad math, because that money rarely gets to the Cuban people. You have not people-to-people exchanges, but tourist to cabana boy exchanges. It doesn't help the Cuban people. And remember, every country has been going to Cuba for all of these years, and what has happened in Cuba? Is there freedom? Is there democracy? Is there respect for human rights? This will be more money going to that machinery to continue to repress even more the Cuban people.
But Congresswoman, part of the argument for the bill that was filed was that shouldn't it be the choice of an American citizen, knowing all of those things that you just talked about, to decide not to go for those reasons? Why is it the U.S. government that's telling people where they can and cannot?
Well, we have had a policy throughout the history of the United States to say, we don't like this kind of government. We're going to sanction that government. We're going to put restrictions. We had those kinds of certain restrictions on the South African horrible system of apartheid. We don't have a one-system-fits-all countries. We have different set of standards for different countries. For Cuba, we have seen that the military, the intelligence service, runs the hotel industry, and that's what we need to tell the folks. Hey, when you're doing this, this is where that money is going to. And how has all of this tourist dollars brought people any closer to those reforms?
The
reality is that it is as repressive. In fact, there have been more arrests last year than in other years. And what has happened in the 18 months that this deal was negotiated in secret between the Obama administration and the Castro regime? People have been sentenced to jail. People have been beaten up. I mean, someone was sentenced to 1 year in prison just 2 days ago. One of these young men who uses very artistic ways to communicate against the regime. He was sentenced to a year in jail for dangerousness that could lead to a crime. That's the kind of...
That's Orwellian.
Yes, Kafka's method that they have in Cuba to intimidate everyone.
Yeah, Ileana, I think I want to get your take, Glenna, and I know this week Raul Castro gave a speech to some Latin leaders in Costa Rica where he laid down the conditions for whatever the new relationship is. He said these have to be met. And here's a quote from what he said in his speech. He said, "Diplomatic relations will not be possible while the blockade remains in effect. The territory illegally occupied by the Guantanamo naval base is not returned. The radio and television broadcast breaching international rules and regulations do not cease. And adequate compensation is not paid to our people for the human and economic damages sustained by the embargo.
What is that, $56 billion?
Unbelievable. I don't know how we can put a dollar sign to all the lives that have been lost trying to flee the Cuban regime. When will the United States be compensated for seized property? But the main thing about Raul Castro's conditions is that it tells you how weak of a president we have in President Obama, that Raul Castro uses this bravado to actually put additional demands. Why not? Because he's gotten the spies back, even though John Kerry said in time and time again, we will not negotiate. We will not give up these convicted spies, and yet he did it. So we've had this secret deal. Nobody knows any details about it. I congratulate Marco. He's going to head that first hearing on Cuba. Then we're going to follow in the House with 2 hearings. And I think people need to know that we don't know the details. Raul Castro is putting more conditions on the United States because President Obama is so weak, and that will have terrible implications for the Iran deal, for the pressure we're putting on Israel, and what will happen with North Korea.
Can I float a theory here? Just a quick question. There is a theory that the Castro brothers want the embargo in place more than anyone else, despite what they say. And there's a history of every time the U.S. makes a move towards some sort of opening, something catastrophic happens, the embargo stays in place. Might these demands be, oh, well, here comes a plan, we're opening up, we can't let that happen, we can't let the embargo stay, so here's all these demands we're going to make to ensure, ironically, that the embargo stays in place. Does that sound plausible?
Yes, I do think it's plausible. The Castro regime is like the Palestinians. They never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. They don't want this deal with Obama, but they're thinking maybe we can get all of these things, because why not? This guy gives in every inch of the way.
Excuse me, but their relationship with Venezuela, which has been their sugar daddy for the last several years and given them these hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil every day, which they then resell on the open market, and that's their main cash supply. I mean, Venezuela, their economy is just tanking, and they know, doesn't Raul Castro know, the Soviets can't bail them out again. Venezuela's not going to be able to bail them out. They need a lifeline. And, of course, the way you said,
and
Barack
too bad
Obama has
that the president is throwing them an economic lifeline. And you don't know about these demands. Maybe the things that the Obama administration really is going to be thinking about. Why shouldn't Raul Castro put additional demands? Because he's gotten so far what he's wanted. And none of this will bring the Cuban people closer to freedom, democracy, and human rights. We didn't even put any cosmetic kind of reforms. Just give us a little bit of BS in there. Right. No BS, well, just flat-out concessions.
Here are some things that the United States is going to demand when the serious talks begin in Washington next time. I mean, there are billions of dollars in expropriated U.S. property. I mean, all those claims have been settled. They're sitting there. I think it's like $6 billion worth of claims. Now, how do you have diplomatic relations with Cuba before those claims are settled, before criminals like Joanne Chesimard are returned, and Cuba is still on the state list of state sponsors of terrorism?
Which was one of the demands.
You know that list is going to be changed. Not only will that's a foregone conclusion. It's like Alice in Wonderland. First the verdict, then the trial. You know, he says let's review it, meaning we're going to get rid of it. We're going to take Cuba off the list, even though they just last year they were smuggling military equipment illegally against international sanctions with North Korea frigate through the Panama Canal. And what did Cuba receive as a punishment for that? Not even a strongly worded 4-page memo. That's it. Not even a slap on the wrist.
Part of the United Nations failed there as well. With
the United States, look, none of this happens without the United States. Because remember, when that happened, we were already in negotiations in secret with the Castro regime. Nothing out of this deal is going to help the Cuban people. That's why they're coming in droves right now. Look at how much the uptick in balseros and illegal entries.
461 last month alone were intercepted at sea by the U.S. Coast Guard, because I think Cubans understand that our immigration policy may change, and wet foot, dry foot may go off the books. Well,
that's something we want to get into. Let's take a quick break and we'll talk about that immigration issue when we come back. Stay with us.
Stay with us.
A new